I mean, he has come a long way in terms of the volume of information he's gotten. That was Kirby Smart talking about his starting quarterback, JT Daniels. And what is this season going to be like for JT Daniels with a full spring, a full summer, not just on campus, but, pretty assuredly being the starting quarterback coming into his, I think this is his fourth season of college football, third, whatever it is. Uh, and this time in Athens with a team that's loaded up, gearing for Atlanta and beyond. Dean Legge from Dog Post, making you a smarter Georgia fan. Listen, this has been a tough year for JT Daniels. It really was. I mean, you think about this time a year ago, figuring out where he was going to go. He didn't decide to come to Georgia until May, and he didn't decide. I guess he decided to leave SC at some point in time in the spring. But when you think about JT's last four games of the season and what people are really expecting from him moving forward, this is a Georgia team that I don't really see how you can say it any other way other than this is a loaded group of wide receivers. Blaylock coming back, George Pickens, Kyrus Jackson, the Burton, and the other freshmen, Smith, Rosemary St. Jack Saint, excuse me. This is a loaded up offense. How is it going to be for JT Daniels and company as they go through this offseason, getting more familiar with one another? What Kirby was talking about there too was that JT understands more now of what Todd Monken has been trying to do in terms of installation of offense and so forth. Installation, I mean, he knew what he was doing for the most part, but they can start getting really intricate here. Think about it, man. Listen, everybody that's a skill player for Georgia is back. I mean, even Demetrius Robertson is back. So they didn't lose a single player that matters, if you want to put it like that, for the 2021 season. This offense could take off in a way that we've just not seen at Georgia since like what Mike Bobo was doing in the passing game. Now the run game was taking off for sure in 2017 and 18 even, but I'm talking about in the passing game. College football has become more and more about passing the ball, and maybe it's just to take advantage of the rules with defensive backs and so forth. Maybe it's just hard to stop. But this is not Kirby Smart's SEC where, in the mid 90s, you were still trying to establish a run. This seems more and more like you're trying to throw the ball into the end zone as often as possible to score as many points as possible. And there's been some adaptation at Georgia moving their offense this way. So for JT, I mean, he's come a long way in terms of the volume of information he's gotten. Other things that you hear from people about JT Daniels is about how smart he is, and that he can really process information. 12-game season is going to be what I want to see from JT Daniels. I remember after the Mississippi State game saying to y'all, hey, is this a one-time thing? Like, is this guy going to be able to do this more than once? I mean, he threw the ball for 400-something yards, 4 touchdowns. Probably should have had a few more yards than that with some drops from George Pickens and Kyrus. Then he did what he did the rest of the season. I mean, he threw whenever he wanted to against South Carolina. He had the first drive was basically a bunch of throws, and the game was over after the first drive. South Carolina was not ready for Georgia that night. It couldn't have been ready. In no scenario would they have been ready. They were just not a good team. But, then they go to Missouri. There's a little bit of pressure, and he throws all over Missouri. But it was the Cincinnati game, to me, that is the leaping off point. And you never know which game is going to be the game where a program gets confidence in what they've got at the time. To me, in 2016, that was the Kentucky game. You talk about moving forward as a program. They'd already been knocked out of the SEC running, and they really weren't going to win that. I mean, got beaten, their brains beaten in by Mississippi, and they had a loss. I don't think they got their brains beaten in by Florida. They got lost to Florida, and then of course the miracle loss to Tennessee and a 1-point loss to Vanderbilt. So this was a Georgia team that was scrapping and trying to hold on. Well, they fight and fight and fight against Kentucky, a game they could have lost. They come down on the last drive of the game. Here's Jacob Eason driving them down the field, and Rodrigo kicks a field goal to win it. I mean, the momentum from that game moving forward for the rest of the year and that the season on, they beat Auburn, they win the bowl game, they lose to Georgia Tech by a point. But the momentum had started moving forward. In 2017, that game was Notre Dame. I mean, everybody remembers the Notre Dame game. The question is, was the Cincinnati game that for JT Daniels in Georgia? Getting down, not playing well offensively the whole day. I mean, they didn't run well. It took him until the end of the game to really get going offensively, and Aziz really helped Aziz Ojulari with his defensive and just the defense in general. But that is that the game that everybody will be looking at moving forward. I'm asking. I don't know. Time will tell. But it seems like I mean, I'm not asking that question if I don't think the answer could be yes, because the momentum from that game with JT driving them down the field to win. They did not have a lot of time. I think it was a minute and a little bit to play. And they had to get down the field. And they did. And it wasn't just with big throws. It was with nickel and dime throws. It was the way you have to do it. And he did it. And I do wonder if, that's going to be the momentum for them moving forward. And now that he's come a long way with information, I mean, if what we saw is not coming a long way, what is coming a long way? What is getting to where you want to go with JT Daniels? And I don't know, man. I mean, I think they really could be good offensively. But there are a couple things that hold me back. The Mississippi State game with the run game, that was questionable. I mean, it wasn't questionable. It was bad. The Cincinnati game, I mean, Cincinnati's defense is good. There's no question. But to not be able to run really with much effectiveness in that game, I mean, there's a couple of times where maybe it's not red flags, but you're kind of pressing pause a little bit along the way. When you're dealing with Clemson's defense, which should be decent, although they were not good against Ohio State, and they were not good in the first game against Notre Dame. That's not a bad defense. And then you just look throughout the league. I mean, Auburn is typically decent on defense. Florida, normally. I mean, we'll see what happens with Arkansas. Arkansas was okay on defense last year. Not great, but okay. That's what gives me pause is, JT can't do it by himself. He did it by himself against Mississippi State, but you can't do it by yourself and really expect to make a run towards the national championship. And that's the thing. If he's come a long way, what does that mean for the rest of the offense? You got to be balanced. They really were balanced, I felt like, against South Carolina and Missouri particularly. They were not as balanced against Cincinnati and Mississippi State, and they still won both those games. They only won them by a score, but they still won both those games. I'm curious to see, as we move forward here, how far JT Daniels can go in a system that he has only for the last year been in. And that's one thing to watch. Let's talk about it over on the website, dawgpost.com, DAWGPOST. Got a lot of recruiting, got a lot of analysis, a lot of insider scoop. We need to see you over on the website, and I hope to see you there soon.